Hey folks, Eder from Brain Pulp TV. It is the pre-release weekend for Ixalan, the newest expansion for Magic Gathering, and that can mean only one thing here on the channel. We have Planeswalker decks to open up. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with Planeswalker decks, every new expansion, Wizards comes out with 2 Planeswalker decks. They actually replace old intro decks, which you may not have even heard of if you're newer to Magic, but these are 60-card standard legal decks. Now, on top of a Planeswalker, which is unique to the deck, there are also 3 other cards which will be unique to that particular deck, and a dual land, which, while not completely unique to this deck, it is printed in other sets before, cannot be found in regular packs of Ixalan or whatever the current expansion is for that particular Planeswalker deck. Now, I am going to be opening up both of the Planeswalker decks, but in this video specifically, I'm going to be opening up Jace, Ingenious, Mind-Mage. So without further ado, let's tear this open and I can show you exactly what is in each of these Planeswalker decks. Okay, let's tear into it. There we go, Ixalan. Okay, now to kick things off, we do have the Planeswalker, which I mentioned before is specific to this deck. I'm just gonna toss this aside. And one thing about the Planeswalkers from these decks is they are, in fact, foil or premium, as Wizards prefers to call them. Now, I'm just going to set this aside right now, and we're going to go over the rest of the contents before I get back to the card and start reading off the Planeswalker. We do get a deck box, which has wonderful artwork. Also has Jace's name on the side. And the great thing about these, and I mentioned this with each of the Planeswalker decks I've opened up so far, is that these deck boxes fit sleeved cards. Now, there were dual decks in the past that didn't fit sleeved cards, and I never understood why that was. So luckily, Wizards has used some better judgment and made these deck boxes that come with the Planeswalker decks fit sleeved cards, which I think is very, very important. I'm gonna toss this aside. Okay, so here is the deck itself sealed up. We're gonna talk about the cards in that in just a second. You also get 2 packs of Ixalan, or whatever the newest expansion will be with a Planeswalker deck. You also have these foldouts here, which always have information on the Planeswalker in question. Oh, did they just make a liar out of me? Is it? No, there he is, Jace, the Ingenious Mind-Mage. Now, as you can see, it goes over a little bit about Jace himself. It talks about the deck, some of the mechanics, and it does not have a deck list, which I think is actually different from before. I thought the other ones had a full deck list, and this does not, so they've changed that. Don't know why they did that. I actually thought that was useful to have the deck list here. So we're just gonna set this aside. You also get the quick reference card, which obviously for players who have been playing Magic for a while is not too useful, but you can always give this to a new player or a player you wanna get into Magic, and it helps them out, because I know it helped me out when I was getting back into Magic, and I needed sort of a refresher course as to what was done when. Gonna move that off to the side. Now we are gonna get to these packs in just a bit, but before I do, let's go through the cards in this deck, and starting off with the Planeswalker itself. And here he is, Jace, Ingenious Mind-Mage. He costs a whopping 6 mana, 4 and 2 blue for a legendary Planeswalker Jace. This is following along with the new rules they have for Planeswalkers. Now follow the legendary rule. His starting loyalty is 5, and his +1 is draw a card, and he has an additional +1 of untap all creatures you control. And finally, he has a -9 of gain control of up to 3 target creatures. Now, Jace here is actually very typical of the type of Planeswalker you will find in these decks, in that 1, he's foil. 2, he's not going to be anywhere near as good as the regular Planeswalker that you can get in regular packs of Ixalan. And 3, he's way overcosted. Now, to be honest, I'm actually a big fan of these Planeswalker decks, but one of the things that really bothers me is how overcosted the Planeswalkers are. Even if it could cost just 1 less. Have him cost 5 instead of 6, and I would probably be a lot more happy. But 6 for this particular Planeswalker is not great, but these decks are not supposed to, like, you know, tear the house down in standard play. They're just supposed to be meant for casual players to get them into the game. But if you cost a Planeswalker so high that most people won't get a chance to cast him, that's kind of unfortunate. Anyways, criticism aside, let's set Jace's side and get to the deck itself. Okay, let's see if I can get this open without using a knife or anything. There we go, tearing right into that. Now, I'm gonna go over each of the cards. I'm only gonna fully read out the rare cards in this particular set, though. So to start things off, we have our first rare, and it is Herald of Secret Streams. For 3 and 1 blue, you get a 2/3 Merfolk Warrior. Creatures you control with +1/+1 counters on them can't be blocked. Get one of those. The next rare in this is a Fleet Swallower for 5 and 2 blue, gets you a 6/6 fish creature. When Fleet Swallower attacks, target player puts the top half of his or her library rounded up into his or her graveyard. I love cards like this, even though this one is crazy costed. Grasping Current for 4 and 1 blue. This, I believe, yes, this is one of the exclusive cards to this deck. Each of these decks come with a tutor card, a card which can call up Jace and or whatever the Planeswalker is for that deck. So it gives you a better chance of pulling them because you only get one Planeswalker in these decks. Anyways, getting back to the card. It is Grasping Current, costs 4, 1 blue for a sorcery. Turn up to 2 target creatures to their owner's hands. Search your library and or graveyard for a card named Jace, Ingenious Mind-Mage, reveal it, put it in your hand. If you search your library this way, shuffle it. Now, I do want to do a separate video on Planeswalker decks and some of my thoughts on it, but for now, I have one thought when it comes to both the Planeswalker and these tutor cards. I would actually be a bit happier if these cards didn't just tutor up your Planeswalker, but also allowed you to cast them for a discount. That would at least make it, in my mind, fine to have Jace cost 6, if when you have this card in your hand, you cast it, it now costs 5 or less instead. I think that may make it a bit more playable, and because it's specific to Ingenious Mind-Mage, it's not like you can abuse this card with other Jaces. It can only be used with this Jace, so I think that might be a good way of sort of getting around the higher cost of the Planeswalkers in this deck. However, enough of my theories as far as how this deck can play out a little bit better. You do get 2 copies of this card in here. Let's move on to the other cards in the deck. We have Kumena's Speaker, Deeproot Warrior, Jungle Delver, getting 2 of those. Kumena's Speaker, these used to all be sort of in order, so you're going to get... And there's another Deeproot Warrior. Why are you doing this to me, Wizards? Why are you doing this to me? Okay, so you're getting 2 copies of each of those. Jace's Sentinel, another one which is specific to this deck. For 1 and 1 blue, you have a 1/3 Merfolk Warrior. As long as you control a Jace Planeswalker, Jace's Sentinel gets +1/+0 and can't be blocked. This is another very common thing from the Planeswalker decks. There is usually a creature which is specifically buffed when you have Jace out on the field. One thing to note, these are not specific to only the Jace Planeswalker from these decks. These actually work with any Jace Planeswalker, though. Most of the time, you're not really going to run this in a regular deck. Anyways, you get three copies of that, unless we find another one later on in here. We have Shaper Apprentice, Vine Shaper Mystic, Shapers of Nature, 2 copies of that. Jade Guardian, Headwater Sentries, couple of those. Tempest Caller, Air Elemental, a classic card, 2 of those. 2 Woodland Streams, these are the, 4 Woodland Streams. These are the dual lands I was talking about before, which you won't find in regular packs of Ixalan. And there's going to be a bunch of forests, a bunch of islands. If there's any other land in here, I'll be super surprised. Nope. Now let's go on to the instants and sorceries. We have River Herald's Boon, 3 copies of those. Castaway's Despair, another card specific to this deck. For 3 and 1 blue, you have an Aura enchantment. You can enchant creature. When Castaway's Despair enters the battlefield, tap enchanted creature. Enchanted creature doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. So you're going to get 4 copies of that, and that is the last card in this deck. So there you go, folks. The Jace Ingenious Mind-Mage Planeswalker deck in its entirety. Now, this is not going to blow the doors off of any sort of tournament or even an FNM for the most part. This is a casual deck for casual or new players who just want to have fun. Now, in the future, I would love to do a video where I take this deck and tweak it a bit with some other cards, put a little bit more money into it, and maybe try to make this a more competitive deck. Not sure if I'm going to get a chance to do that or when I'm going to get a chance to do that. But what I can tell you is this coming Tuesday, Travis, formerly from Brain Pulp, and myself are going to be recording a new episode of the Mana Cave, and we're going to be battling it out with this deck and the other new Planeswalker deck, Hotly Dinosaur Knight. I think that's how it's pronounced. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the Mana Cave, I will provide a link taking you to one of those videos where we battle it out with previous Planeswalker decks. But in the meantime, let's get back to this Planeswalker deck and open up the 2 packs of Ixalan that came with it. And here they are. Let's start with this nasty fellow on the front of this pack and see what we have inside. Now, there's only 2 packs, so I'm going to read off each card, but I'm only going to read off the rare in its entirety. So we've got our first common, which is Blight Keeper. Talonales, I think, Knight, Storm Sculptor, Spike-tailed Ceratops. I'm probably going to mess up the pronunciation of a lot of these cards. Not going to mess up this one. Headstrong Brute, Kinjali's Collar. I think I nailed that one. Stormfleet Pyromancer, Spreading Rot, Raptor Companion, Spell Pierce, excellent, a nice reprint that I'm super happy to see in this set. Rallying Roar is our first uncommon. Then we have Stormfleet Aerialist. Our last uncommon is Adzokin Archer. I have no idea if I got that right. And our rare is Old Growth Dryads. I'm not crazy about this card. There might be a way or a deck that can make this card work, but I would never play this probably unlimited. I can't see wanting to give my opponent the advantage. Anyways, let's read off the card. For 1 green, you get a 3/3 Dryad creature. That sounds absolutely wonderful. However, when Old Growth Dryads enters the battlefield, each opponent may search his or her library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle his or her library. So yeah, the advantage of getting a 3/3 on turn 1, but giving your opponent an extra land right off the bat, I don't see this being a playable card, at least not limited. Once again, there may be a constructed deck that someone can build around this, and if they do, please let me know. Or if you have any ideas what can make this particular rare useful, I'd love to hear it. Anyways, we will set that aside. We have an Ixalan Forest, and we have the new treasure token. The token artifact treasure sacrifices artifact, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. I'm a big fan of tokens and a token collector, so I'm pretty happy to get new tokens whenever a new set comes out. Moving on, let's get to the last pack with this shouty fellow here. Once again, I'll read off each of the cards, but only going to fully read off the rare, unless there's a particular card that catches my eye and I want to read the whole thing. We have Legion Conquistador, Dire Fleet Hoarder, Talonials? I screwed this one up last time, didn't I? Tilonal, whatever. Tease Knights, Looming Altasaur, River Herald's Boon, Prosperous Pirates, Water Trap Weaver, Hijack, Pious Interdiction, Crushing Canopy. Our first uncommon is Lookout's Dispersal, Call to the Feast. Our last uncommon is Raptor Hatchling, and our rare is Blood Crazed Paladin. For 1 and 1 black, gets you a 1/1 Vampire Knight. Got Flash. Blood Crazed Paladin enters the battlefield with a 1/1 counter on it for each creature that died this turn. Definitely like this card a lot better than the Old Growth Dryad, so I'm pretty happy to get a copy of this. We have a Mountain and a Vampire token, a 1/1 Vampire token with lifelink. So there you go, folks. That is what you can expect to find in a Jace Ingenious Mind Planeswalker deck pack. Now, in the past, I've done pretty good with some of the rares that I've pulled in the 2 packs that come with these Planeswalker decks. Not so much this time, however, we do have one more Planeswalker deck to open up. And that deck is Hotly, I'm almost sure that's how you pronounce the name, Dinosaur Knight. This is going to be in a separate video, which should actually be out now if you're watching this one, so keep an eye out for that and check it out if you get a chance. In the meantime, too, let me know what you think of the new Planeswalker deck so far, or what sort of rares you got in the packs from a Planeswalker deck if you bought one, or even how you did in your pre-release, or just think about Ixalan so far. I'd love to hear from you guys. And with all that said, thank you guys very much for watching, liking, subscribing, doing everything you do to help support the channel. It means a lot to me. May all your pulls be mythics, and I'll see you all again very soon.